Increasing your training volume has proven to be one of the best ways to improve as a runner, but it only works if it's sustainable and you can stay healthy. The good news is there's a simple solution to achieve that, and it's running more than once per day. For a long time, when I started running back in high school, that you only could run once per day. You had your daily run, and once it was over, that was it. That's what our coaches were having us do. That's what I had learned was allegedly the most optimal way to train, the way to get the most benefit is to just get everything in at once, have your runs just be like continuous, longer runs. That was how you got better. But I also just enjoyed the convenience of it, only having to run once per day. That's it. Once it's over, you're just done, you can relax. But the problem was, as I started to get older and as I started to run more volume, particularly as I started to get over like 50 or 60 miles per week, adding all that new mileage on top of the existing runs that I was already doing was starting to become kind of a lot. I was getting to the end of the week and just feeling spent. My legs were cooked. I would go out for the Sunday easy run, just so slow, so sore. It was not fun. So I tried doubling for the first times. On those like 8-mile days where it's not like a long run or a medium long run, they're just kind of in between. Instead of trying to like bump those up to 10 or 12 miles, I would add 4 or 5 miles of easy training in the morning. It took some getting used to, especially because I was starting this in the winter. When I would go out in the morning, it was cold and dark. But after a while, you get used to that. And then I'd get to the end of the week and my legs weren't all beat up and tired anymore. So despite what I have learned and what a lot of people have learned, where it's preached that single runs just continuously are the best thing for you. In the early days, that's kind of what like Lydiard training was like. If you've read Running with the Buffaloes about Colorado, Mark Wetmore back in the 90s, that's what they were big on. Like, despite all of that, how can doubling work? How can it be an effective way to increase your mileage? So there's really 2 key reasons why doubling can work for increasing volume. So even though you might get a little bit more training stimulus by just extending an existing run, going from like 60 to 90 minutes, in a vacuum that is true, but the reality is you're not just doing those runs as a one and done. It's a daily thing. You're doing multiple per week, back to back to back. If you're hitting 90 plus minutes every day continuously, that can start to add up. The recoverability of those like long single days is lower than double days would be. At a certain point, if you're doing too much all at once every single day, you're just kind of can be running yourself into the ground. Double days don't necessarily have that. If you split your mileage up a little bit, that load is not going to be like cumulatively as high. It's going to be easier to recover from that. And that kind of ties into our second reason, kind of an explanation why. So after about 30 minutes of exercise, doesn't really matter what kind of exercise, your body has a hormonal response where you'll be able to get some like recovery hormones, things like human growth hormone that are going to get released as a response to that exercise stimulus. It's one of the reasons exercise in general is just so good for you. But the biggest increases in this hormonal response typically happen around 30 to 40 minutes of exercise. Once you go beyond that, especially like looking at 60 plus minutes, that release kind of plateaus to where if you're going any longer, you're not really getting any more of it. So let's say in our example, you're running twice a day. If it's at least 30 minutes both times, you're getting a double shot of this hormonal release. And then especially if both runs are under 60 minutes, you're getting that kind of double dose hormonal response without the fatigue and the beating up of your legs that you would get if you just like combine that all into one session. You get your mileage that you need split up into multiple runs. You get that double dose, helps recovery, helps with adaptation. That can be why like splitting your mileage up can still give you a lot of benefit versus the continuous run that is supposedly better. So those two reasons are the main reason why doubling can work. Instead of increasing the length of your runs each day in the week, you are increasing the amount of total runs in your week, lowering the risk of injury or burnout. So instead of sticking to 6 or 7 days per week and just increasing each of those days, you can increase your total amount of runs to maybe 8 to 10 per week. You could keep that mileage of the original like 6 or 7 days the same while adding volume just by adding those runs. And they don't have to be very long. Like I said, just 30 or 40 minutes is fine. If you look at elite athletes, most of them are going to be doubling at least 2 to 3 times per week. And some will even limit their length of individual runs. Hobbs Kessler had talked about in the past, the maximum length of any individual run of his was only 7 miles, which is going to be under an hour for him. But despite that, he was still running probably around 90 miles per week. So it just shows like you can still get a lot of volume even when things are pretty split up and any individual run is not all that long. So how can you implement this into your training and start to use this to increase your volume in a more sustainable way? If you've never doubled before, I'd recommend starting with cross training instead of running. Just 1 or 2 days where you have your typical run and then your second session is going to be on the elliptical, the bike, the pool, whatever, probably for the same amount of time that you eventually want to start running, whether that's 30 or 40 minutes, just to kind of get the body used to moving twice a day, just without that load on the legs. If you didn't want to do that, you could try experimenting with splitting a day. You probably want to keep your medium long runs and your long runs intact, but on those kind of in-between days, let's say you had an 8-mile day, just try splitting that up into like 4 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon. See how that feels. Just get used to moving twice a day, even if that daily volume is the same as it was before. Over time, you can start to increase one or both of those runs, try to increase your mileage that way. But no matter what, it's just taking your time. Just start with those 1 to 2 easy cross training days or those split days. As you get comfortable, you can increase the volume of each of the doubles, and you can still increase the volume of the singles. Those don't have to stay the same forever. Like a 6-4 double day can become like an 8-6 down the line if you are ready for that. And then also what's true of any way you're increasing mileage, whether that's like the traditional singles way or this method of doubles, especially if you are like kind of reaching for mileage that you haven't hit before, just every 3 or 4 weeks, take that down week, make sure you are recovered. Don't just continuously increase if you're not ready for that. And most people aren't, especially if they haven't hit that mileage before. That's a recipe for getting injured. And we don't want to get injured. We want to stay healthy. The best way to train is to be training at all. You can't do that if you've got like tendonitis or a stress fracture. Just want to make sure you are healthy. And I think adding doubles or splitting things up and then increasing the volume of each of those runs is a very good way to build mileage in a way that's much more sustainable than just adding mileage on top of your additional runs. It's like you'll often hear the advice, if you want to run faster, you have to run more. And the default answer might just think each of my runs need to be longer, but the reality is you can maybe get more benefit by not necessarily at increasing the mileage of each run, but by adding more runs to your schedule in general. Hope you got some good advice and insight from this video. If you want to keep expanding your running knowledge and improve your training and racing, check the links in the bio. I've got some good stuff for you.